We're going to talk about a technology today that honestly feels like it's jumped right out of a sci-fi movie and into the operating room. We are dissecting, pun fully intended, the incredible world of robotic surgery.
So, where does this all begin? Well, believe it or not, the story of the surgical robot doesn't start in a hospital or a lab. It actually starts right here in the pages of a science fiction story from 1942. Long before it was even remotely possible, writers were dreaming up these machines that could operate with, well, superhuman precision. So, the big question is, how do you get from a sci-fi novel to an actual real-life scalpel in an operating room? Well, the origins are pretty surprising. Turns out it was born from two of the biggest ambitions of the 20th century, the needs of the military and the dream of the space race. Okay, so picture this. It's the 70s and 80s. You've got DARPA, the military's research arm, and NASA, and they're both obsessed with the exact same idea, telesurgery. For DARPA, the goal was huge. Could a surgeon operate on a wounded soldier right on the battlefield from a safe bunker miles away? We talk about the golden hour in trauma care, that critical window. They wanted to turn it into a golden minute. And at the same time, NASA is thinking, hey, what if we need to do surgery on an astronaut deep in space? It's the same problem, just a different battlefield.
And what's crazy is just how fast this all happened. Look at this timeline. We start in 1983 with a robot that's basically just a glorified leg holder in an orthopedic surgery. But then, boom, 2 years later, a different robot is precise enough to help with a brain biopsy. That's a huge leap. Then, by 94, we get a robotic arm that becomes a surgeon's dedicated camera operator, their third hand. You can see how each of these was a critical building block, all leading up to the year 2000, when the Vinci system arrived and basically put all the pieces together, completely changing the game.
And then came this, the moment that proved the entire concept wasn't just a dream. In 2001, we have the Lindbergh operation. Get this, a surgeon is sitting in New York City and the patient is on an operating table in France, over 3,000 miles away, and the surgeon successfully removes the patient's gallbladder. This was the ultimate proof of concept. Remote surgery was officially no longer science fiction.
Okay, so that's the history, the how we got here. But what is this machine, really? How does the modern surgical robot actually work?
So the system, like the famous Da Vinci, is really a three-part harmony. First, you've got the surgeon's console, and this is key. The surgeon isn't standing over the patient anymore. Nope. They're sitting comfortably, looking into this console like it's a high-tech video game, seeing a magnified 3D image from inside the patient's body. Then you have the patient side cart with these incredible robotic arms. The surgeon's hand movements are translated in real time to these tiny instruments that can bend and rotate in ways a human wrist could only dream of, and all with any natural hand tremor completely filtered out. The whole thing is connected by a vision cart, which is basically the brains of the operation.
And if you're wondering if this is just some niche technology, well, take a look at this number. 17 million. That's how many procedures have been done with the Da Vinci system around the world. So yeah, this isn't some futuristic experiment anymore. It's a fundamental part of modern surgery, for sure.
Now, for a long time, Intuitive's Da Vinci was basically the only game in town. They had the market cornered, but that's finally starting to change, and fast. You've got new players jumping in, like Medtronic and CMR Surgical, and what's interesting is they're not just making clones of the Da Vinci, they're trying to solve different problems, making systems that are more modular, more portable, designed for smaller hospitals, and crucially, trying to bring the costs down.
Okay, this tech is obviously super impressive, but what does it actually feel like? What does it mean for the human beings on either side of the equation, the surgeon holding the controls and the patient on the table?
Just think about it from the surgeon's perspective. The old way, traditional surgery, is a physical marathon. You're standing for hours, hunched over, getting physically exhausted. Your hands have a natural tremor, which you're constantly fighting. Now with robotic surgery, it's a total paradigm shift. You're sitting down, ergonomically supported. The machine filters out any tremor, giving you rock-steady precision. And you're not just looking at the patient. You're immersed in a magnified 3D high-def view. It turns a physically demanding job into one of intense mental focus.
And on the patient's side, the best-case scenario is just life-changing. Take this quote from Julie Moss. She had a robotic hysterectomy. I was home the same day, back swimming laps in 2 weeks. Let that sink in. 2 weeks. That kind of recovery is something that would have been absolutely unthinkable with a traditional large incision open surgery.
And this is a really important but. It's not a magic wand. It doesn't guarantee a perfect outcome. This other patient's story is a really tough but necessary reality check.
After a robotic prostatectomy, he was left with persistent pain and other serious complications. It's a stark reminder that even with this incredible technology, surgery is still surgery. The risks are still there, and devastating complications can and do happen.
And that really brings us to the heart of the debate, doesn't it? We have this incredible promise on one side and a very, very real price tag on the other. So, let's get into the hype, the reality, and the actual cost.
So let's look at the hard data. If you compare a robotic prostatectomy to an old-school open one, the benefits are pretty clear in some areas. Less blood loss? Check. Shorter hospital stay? Check. That's great. But when you look at the really critical long-term functional outcomes, the stuff that really impacts a patient's quality of life down the road, the data is, well, the word scientists use is equivocal, which is basically a fancy way of saying it's a wash. There's no clear winner. The results end up being surprisingly similar.
And then there's the money. The price tag for a hospital to get into the robot game is just staggering. First, you have to buy the machine itself, which can be up to $2.5 million. But it doesn't stop there. Then you've got to pay an annual service contract that can be close to $200,000 a year. And then, for every single surgery, you're paying around $2,000, sometimes more, for the disposable instruments. It just adds up and up and up.
So, when you have those kinds of costs, what happens? Hospitals feel immense pressure to market the heck out of their new robot to justify the expense. And that's where you get this gap between the hype and the reality. The marketing might make you think it's the best option for every procedure, hands down. But the clinical reality is a lot more nuanced. Its benefits are often comparable to standard laparoscopy, which is way cheaper. And here's the most important part. The ads imply a better outcome is guaranteed by the machine, but the truth is, the outcome still depends almost entirely on the experience and skill of the surgeon behind the console.
Okay, so where is all this headed? What's the next frontier? Let's look to the future, because the line between the surgeon and the machine, it's about to get really, really blurry. But before we get too excited about the future, we have to face a pretty tough reality in the present. That massive price tag we talked about, it has created a huge global divide. Look at this. A staggering 70% of all robotic surgeries are performed in high-income countries. For most of the planet, this potentially life-changing technology is completely out of reach. It basically means that access to this level of care depends on where you live and how wealthy your country is.
There's another long-term concern that's starting to get a lot of attention, and it's called de-skilling. Think of it as the Google Maps effect for surgeons. We all know what happens when you rely on GPS all the time, right? You kind of forget how to read a map or navigate on your own. The fear is the same for surgeons. If you train almost exclusively on the robot, what happens to your ability to perform a traditional open surgery? What happens when the robot fails or a complication arises and you suddenly need those old-school hands-on skills? It's a real worry.
Okay, despite those challenges, the future is looking, well, incredible. That original dream of telesurgery, it's coming back in a big way, with the potential to finally serve all those remote and underserved areas. We're talking about nanobots, tiny microscopic robots that could go in and reconnect individual nerves. And we're seeing the first steps toward autonomy. There's a system called the STAR robot that can already perform tasks like suturing a piece of tissue, and the research shows it does it better and more consistently than a human surgeon.
And all of this leads to one final, really provocative question. We are on a clear path to a future where the robot isn't just an assistant anymore, but could potentially perform the entire surgery on its own. So when that day comes, what is the role of the human surgeon? What does it mean to be a surgeon when it's the machine, not the human, that's holding the scalpel?